And my youngest brother.
And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Timbuktu Report. The question of educating the freed Negro was a dilemma, and how and why is it still a dilemma today? As we talk about what's being taught in our education system across the country, how is this balancing act, and why should it be a balancing act of educating the Negro and then educating the masses about educating the Negro? That's our topic tonight with Dr. Rick Stevenson. Please do stay with us on the Timbuktu Report and share. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Timbuktu Report. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Please share this. I think this is probably, Dr. Stevenson, one of the most important shows that we have done over the 2 years of us doing the Timbuktu Report because education was illegal for the Negro, and then how it evolved and why was there such a dilemma. Dr. Rick Stevenson is our guest tonight, as he is every night almost on the Timbuktu Report. He's a professor of African American history and African American studies at the University of Florida, and he is also a man of the cloth. So, Dr. Stevenson, welcome. And as we always enjoy, please take us to the Lord in prayer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the welcome, and let's pray together. Lord, thank you so much for education, for um, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And so we beseech you today to help us to better understand why there was such a prohibition on education and then how it was overcome. That even though there were restrictions and laws passed, Black people were very clear that education was the way to success. So we pray that tonight we will say something, do something that challenges others to be better educated. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Dr. Stevenson, you said something that many of us in our generation heard so many times, that education was the way out. Dr. Stevenson, do you think that perhaps if African Americans knew more about just a few years ago, even though in 1865 there was a bureau that was started about educating the Negro, but then how it has evolved, but not evolved enough? But first, Emancipation Proclamation, it's been illegal to educate Negroes. It's been illegal to teach a Negro to read. What happens after the Emancipation Proclamation?
Well, once the Emancipation Proclamation is signed, and then we get into the Civil War and Reconstruction, Black people are in some sense and in some positions in the South of authority. You have over 20 African Americans in the Congress and in the House of Representatives. But beyond that, you have a number of colleges and universities that begin to sprout up because the church. When we talk about the Freedmen's Bureau, we need to also talk about the role of the Black church. That's how the education really begins to get into the Black communities. They start creating colleges and universities. They start putting money out to make sure that Black people can be educated. The United Methodist Church, for instance, established 70 schools in the South and the Southeast for Blacks between 1866 and 1882. Schools like Bennett College, Claflin College, Dillard University, Meharry Medical School in Tennessee, Wiley College in Texas, Bethune-Cookman. These universities and colleges were founded by Black people for Black people because they could not attend um, the regular universities and the public universities. And what's really interesting is Frederick Douglass says, knowledge makes a man or a woman unfit to be a slave. And the dominant culture was very clear about that. But there was a problem. And the dilemma was, how do we educate them so that we can use them for our businesses, but also keep them under educated so that they will remain servile and compliant? So that was really the dilemma, you know. There were only three states in the Confederacy that prohibited, that did not prohibit African Americans from learning how to read. That was Maryland, Kentucky, and I can't think of the other one right now. It'll come back to me. But
Mhm.
all the other Confederate states made it illegal to teach black people how to read.
And reading is fundamental.
Fundamental. Fundamental. And you know what's interesting about that, if I can continue? I used to do a Bible study in Grand Rapids, and I used to do this in a barbershop. And I had this young brother who really could read, who read very well, came to me after a Bible study and said, "Listen, Doc, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't ask me to read anymore." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "I don't want the guys to know I'm smart."
Mm, yeah.
I mean, broke my heart. And
Mhm.
so your first question was, if our young people today understood what it took to learn how to read,
Right.
the punishment that one received for learning how to read. Frederick Douglass used to take pages of a book and a candle and at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, hide in a corner of a barn and learn words. And now we
Hmm.
have the internet, and we'd rather watch a video than read a book.
Pornography.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Yes. The,
um, okay.
this dilemma that we continue to face, because now it's not illegal for students to read, but how do we are we still facing this in 2022 when we look at alternative schools or these um, schools, charter schools, for an example, that
Hmm.
are essentially private schools paid for by taxpayers' dollars?
Hmm.
How is that still in play? That
Yeah.
we're educating, but we don't want them to be too smart.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways that they're doing it is various schools and school systems receive state funds, government funds, federal funds based on test scores. So what's happening is, instead of teaching students to read and be critical, to analyze and to arrive at conclusions, they're being taught to pass a standardized test. And so what happens, rather than learning how to analyze data and critique information, they are memorizing information so they can check a box. And then at the end of the day, once they have checked all those boxes and passed those tests, if you asked that child 2 weeks later, what did they learn? They don't remember because they're not being taught to engage with the data. I have that now, where
Yeah.
students are accustomed to checking a box as opposed to analyzing data and then arriving at a conclusion because of their own critical methodology.
Someone who is in a position of doing hiring here in this community, and he said we have these two schools of higher learning, the University of Florida and Santa Fe Community College, and this is going across the board, whether it's the black students or white students. He said they know this much right here.
Hmm.
If they have to think up here, they can't do it, and if they have to go down here, they can't do it. They
Exactly.
only know this right here. Dr. Rick Stevenson is talking about the challenges, the balancing act for the African, the newly freed African. The Freedmen Bureau was set up specifically to address the need of the free Negro children. What um, what were some of the biggest challenges?
Well, some of the biggest challenges were the war between the North and the South's understanding of who should learn and who shouldn't, right? Because this is what people fail to realize. Fearing that black literacy would prove a threat to the slave system, because black people would be reliant upon the master to survive. The way you keep them dependent is to keep them from thinking beyond the box. Well, that's what we're doing now. There's a law, there is a bill in the process right now called HB 7, where the governor of Florida is trying to prevent us from teaching various aspects about race and gender, etc., because that makes people uncomfortable. It's almost going back into the 1800s. And the point is this: the dominant culture, the plantocracy, the elite wants to keep the quote underclass dependent upon them. And so the less educated they are, the more dependent upon we are on the system.
The less educated in the
Yes.
land of the free, the home of the brave. What
Right.
you just said, it sounds like we are physically free, but our minds are in shackles.
Exactly. Tennessee's the other state. It was Maryland, Kentucky, and Tennessee passed laws against. They were the only states that in a confederacy that passed a law that did not prohibit African Americans from learning how to read. All of the rest of the states passed laws that made it illegal.
When so we have these situations in place today where there is a desire. I think students want to know the truth. I
They
think
do.
the general public really wants to know the truth. So this mindset of not teaching. Well, as a matter of fact, in Memphis, I was told in Memphis, in the school system in Memphis, that the goal is to educate warehouse workers because Memphis is a hub. Five
Right.
class one railroads, the Mississippi River, the convergence of five interstates,
Mhm.
um, FedEx. So they need people who can drive a forklift, but not manage people who drive a forklift,
Exactly.
people who can throw boxes. How, with this, I mean, it's really, really strategic the way that it's in place.
Sure.
What can families do? Because I think that's where the change has to happen today. We can no longer depend on a law or a system
Sure.
to fill in the void.
Sure. I think the first thing that we have to do is, and I teach at a PWI, and I really enjoy what I do at the University of Florida. But I think we have to stop telling our black kids that HBCUs are less than PWIs. You have to understand universities like Fisk, Howard University, Hampton, Clark. These are the top 10 black universities in the country. They were all founded by the Freedmen Bureau, the Freedmen's Bureau, right? Even Howard University is named after General Oliver Otis Howard, who was a white general in the Union Army. And so most of these schools were founded by white people for black students. And if you look at the numbers, there are more black students who graduate with higher levels of degree from HBCUs than they do PWIs. And so we have to stop telling our kids that HBCUs are not at the same level as other universities, because they're not. I have degrees from there. My brother has a degree from Lincoln University. My sister has a degree from Lincoln University. And my son, my oldest son, has a degree from Lincoln University. So, just these black schools are turning out scholars.
And what's the feeling that you think for African American students when they're on campuses, on HBCU campuses, Lane College in my hometown, Jackson, Tennessee, part of the Methodist
Hmm. Hmm.
schools
Hmm.
that were started by the Methodist Church.
Hmm.
What's the difference?
Okay. So the difference is this. When you're at an HBCU and the majority of your professors look like you, they know your experience. They know what it takes for you to be successful because they've had to navigate in this environment. And so they see you, I see my students as an inheritance. I see them as part of the family. I see them as my children in a sense that I have to help learn how to function in this society that's designed to keep them oppressed. Oftentimes in the PWI, the professor sees these students as a threat. They don't see them as part of the family. As a matter of fact, oftentimes, and I've asked this question on several occasions, oftentimes some of these black and brown students are experience a lot of condescension from their professors because they don't look like them. And so the experience on the HBCU campus is entirely different. The second thing is, and this is really important, is the role of Black Greek organizations on Black campuses. Because these organizations came into existence because it was so difficult making it academically without some kind of collegial, familial collaboration. And so the social experience is different as well. And they don't even talk about homecoming because homecoming is just through the roof.
Yeah, it is a different kind of feeling. I will say that I have not had a desire to go back to a homecoming where I attended college.
Hmm.
That probably would have been different had I attended an HBCU.
Yeah.
You know, the thought that the education is inferior because it's all black, um, and thought that by black people.
Hmm.
But doesn't that speak to the thought process in a larger community in everything that we're doing,
Sure it does.
everything that we're a part of? Because, as someone said, I was so disappointed to find out that the water tasted the same in the
Yeah.
white fountain and the colored fountain, that the
Yeah.
water tasted the same. I really thought that as soon as I was able to drink, Richard Darnell actually said that.
Hmm.
As soon as I had an opportunity to drink out of a whites only fountain, I thought the water was going to be better, but it
Hmm.
tasted the same. So
Hmm.
to that point of uh, the education of the Negro, but you know that there's a possibility that they can be educated the same. So how do we put something in place to make sure that it still looks like they're not as smart?
Well, first of all, we have this notion that anything black or brown is inferior. I mean, it is so well woven into the fabric of America that anytime let me say it this way. There are a number of universities that have African or African American studies programs. And in the 1970s, the biggest debate was, should we use black? Should we use African? Should we use African American? Should we use Africana? Because anytime you mention something like that, the needle always goes down. And so, even in the nomenclature of a study or a course, we have to be careful about the language because there's such a stigma that's been attached to anything African. So, that's the first thing. The second thing is that we are constantly challenged to dilute what we teach so that the people who are not in that group don't feel uncomfortable. One of the things I do in matter of fact, the class I'm teaching semester, the first day, the first I do a section on education, and in the first day of class, I show 3 or 4 slides with nothing but African American men and women with PhDs, DMins, THDs, etc. Because I want these students to know that black people earn PhDs. And I want them to see these young kids. I have this one picture in front of me right now. It's from Clark University, where it's 5 black women. They all have on their robes with their chevrons and their crowns, and they all have on their Greek stoles. So you got the Delta Sigma Theta, you got
Do
AKA.
you want me to share?
I don't know if I can.
You don't think you can?
I don't know if I can show it. Let me see.
I wonder if I can.
Because if I'm not mistaken, I sent you the slide for that.
Right? You did. Um,
Can you share it? And then right below it, there is these five African American males who graduated from Ohio State, and they all have PhDs as well.
Yeah,
And my
even during the hearing for Justice Jackson,
hmm
and seeing her best friends and all of these women, all of these black women in law school, and I was looking at them thinking, we haven't seen that enough.
right.
We haven't seen, and that's one of the reasons that we do this show is because uh, I take it as an honor to share our story.
Okay,
To you think you got it?
I'm going to try to share this slide, share screen, share screen. Uh,
Share screen.
I don't think I can do it.
Can't. Entire screen window. I thought I had it up,
Yeah.
and then I lost it.
Oh, here
Well,
it is.
we can post it. You got it?
I have it. Yeah.
Share.
Okay. Can you see that?
Add to screen. There it is.
Can you see
Can
that?
you can you make it full screen?
Let me see.
Just hit down there in the corner to make it full screen.
Hold on for a second.
Oh, we're talking about the progress or lack of progress
Can you see that?
overall. Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
Okay. So what I do is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So what I do in the class is I tell my students, okay, let's analyze this photograph. So what do you see? And the first thing, obviously, they see they're all women. I say, okay, but what else did you see? So they all have on robes. I said, yeah, but what about the robes? And they didn't know what the chevrons were, the three stripes on the sleeve. Each level of education has a different type of robe. The bachelor's degree robe is completely open at the bottom because it suggests the continual growth in education. The master's degree has a tag that hangs from the robe, and then the doctorate degree has the chevrons, the crown, and if you notice the woman with the Zeta Phi Beta, she has her hood on her arm. And when you get a doctorate, your chair hoods you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the crown, right, represents the eight-sided crown represents the PhD or the doctorate degree. Now, if I drop down, you'll see the same thing. Can I do that?
Should
Uh,
be able to just select it.
how do I do that?
Click
Select.
on it. Try.
Uh, oh, it's only one share one screen. Well, the next screen though um, shows five African American men. Oh, let me do it this way. Here you go. Let's try this because I need this. I need them to see this. Um, hold on.
We're talking about
Okay.
America's dilemma in educating the newly freed Negro, and a dilemma that continues today. Um, it's not talked about, but when we see the outcomes of a graduation rate of African American students that is um, does not match what we ought to be seeing today with African American students in schools, the number of African American students in alternative schools or alternative programs. Um, how did we get to this place in our education system?
Right.
Perhaps if we understood uh, what and the uncomfortableness of educating the Negro in 1865 and the uncomfortableness of educating the Negro in 2022 that still exist.
Right. So can you see it now?
Mhm.
So we're accustomed to seeing black people on the basketball court. We're accustomed to seeing black people on the football field. We're accustomed to seeing people black people doing entertainment, but we're not accustomed to seeing black five PhDs who graduate from the University of Ohio. And why
Mm,
is that? Right? And so I try to introduce my students to this concept because if they don't see it, they can't be it. So if you notice in this particular slide, you've got these black men on the main page, but up in the right hand corner is the black woman because I'm trying to demonstrate the balance.
hmm
And our young kids, they hardly ever see that.
Right.
And so if they don't see it, they tend not to want to strive for it. They don't even know it exists. I had a student who didn't even know what a PhD was.
Yeah. Dr. Stevenson, why today are we still counting on somebody else to do it? Because we know it needs to be done. We speak of the lack of things the lack of things being done, and then express shock. I think as we look at the expected outcomes is exactly we're getting what was expected.
Yeah. I think that I'll answer it historically and then I'll answer it from an opinionated perspective. Historically, as we have pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps and we created cities, towns like Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, um, Ocoee, Florida, Rosewood, Florida, St. Louis, towns that were thriving financially. When we have made those efforts to do it on our own, the dominant culture has found a reason to be upset and burn the city down, kill people, and chase them out of town. 1896, 1898, North Wilmington, North Carolina is thriving with black people. The whites come in because they're angry, because they don't want black men in leadership. They burn down the Senate printing press. Over 300 people are killed, and it takes another 96 years before a black person is elected to the Congress in Wilmington. So the first thing is historically, when we start making these strides, we end up having to riot or leave the town because someone hated it. My opinion is, however, that for some odd reason, we think that if we integrate, they're going to like us. They're going to accept us. And the truth of the matter is, even with a PhD, I'm still the N word in America, and so are the rest of us. And until we understand that that is a concept that has nothing to do with achievement, nothing to do with it with accomplishments, you've got a person, LeBron James, who has spent his money building a school in Ohio, taking care of kids, and someone says to him, "Just shut up and play ball," right?
Mm,
Because we're not supposed to think, right? And
right.
until we get to a place where the dominant culture acknowledges and accepts that our intelligence and our intellect does not should not cause a threat, we're always going to be in this war of why we should not be on the same level as they are.
And all of those incidents that you cited where more than 100, 200 African American thriving communities were burned to the ground.
To the ground.
Um, and researchers will tell you that African Americans suffer from post traumatic stress syndrome from that, as well as the passage getting here. And then uh, you have the opportunity to achieve, you try to achieve, then your place gets burned down, and then you stop trying to achieve, and then they start saying that you're lazy and shiftless.
Exactly. And then you look at what's his name? Deion Sanders has one of the top football players in the country who decided not to go to a PWI to come and play for him. And the place went crazy, right? As long as these black students are going to these PWIs and making millions and millions and millions of dollars for these coaches, it's okay. But now they want to start playing for black universities, and there's something wrong with that. And I think that we have to keep in the forefront of our minds that for some odd reason, blackness in America will always have a tinge of inferiority to it because that notion is woven into the fabric of the American culture.
Dr. Rick Stevenson, we're discussing education in the United States of America, and particularly the education of the newly freed slave in 1865, the Freedmen's Bureau that made it possible for the Negro to be educated, but with some stipulations. And those stipulations still exist today. They don't get talked about, but they still exist.
Hmm.
And as we're discussing this, I hope that you will share this and really take some time to look at your family, look at um, how you are being discussed and the significance. How much emphasis are you putting on education in your family?
Hmm.
And can I just say this? Uh, Before we do the libations, before we light up the joint, because people are doing that, is let's understand that the attack of the mind is the goal,
Hmm.
and our young people are suffering as a result of it because those images that you just showed of people graduating with PhDs, they don't make the music videos.
Right.
That's not the entertainment image that's being shown to our young people so that they can know that they're bright enough, that they're brilliant enough to achieve those stripes on the scarves that are hung around the necks of
Mm.
those who have accomplished degrees in higher learning.
And if I can just say one more thing, you asked the question, why do we, not continue to thrive? In 1870, I don't know if you're familiar with Talladega College in Alabama.
Hmm.
It's the oldest private historical black liberal arts college in the country, founded in 1867, 2 years after the war is over. The attempted education of these Negroes aroused such a hatred that they killed the president of the school in 1870. Now, how do you explain that? How do you justify that? The president is obviously trying to build an educational environment, hiring professors, raising money so that people can be educated. And they said, you know what? We don't want this to happen. So we're going to kill the president. 1870, 5 years after the Civil War is over, 3 years after school starts. So, I mean, until we get to a place where, and I try to teach my students this all the time, you know, the one of the most important things that we can learn in a college and a university and high school is the respect for humanity,
Right,
regardless, right? Regardless of your ethnicity, your culture, your background, your hairstyle. If we don't respect each other as humans, all the rest of the stuff is superfluous.
right, right, right. Dr. Rick Stevenson, um, you know, I hope that those who are watching will understand and take this very, very seriously because we're losing our young people because we haven't taught them.
Hmm.
We have to stop waiting on somebody else to teach our children who they are. Legislation can't keep you from teaching it at your table, regardless to what happens in a school building.
Hmm.
You have the opportunity to teach at your table, to read to your children about who they are and the significance of education and why there is the opportunity for you to be educated and why it is important that you make sure that you are educated and that you're doing everything that you can to utilize what you're learning as opposed to allowing your brain cells to be cooked by various substances that are out there, and that's a reality and a challenge. As my cousin says, Cavassier and weed.
See,
Yeah,
Malcolm said you cannot expect the oppressor to teach your kids.
yeah. So brilliant, brilliant minds who were brilliant enough to build this country until it was time to write them a check.
Hmm.
We got to pay you. We got to make sure that you don't think you're smart and nobody else thinks you're smart either.
Right. And we'll do everything we can to prevent that.
Right, right. Let's not feed into that today. Dr. Stevenson, thank you very much for shifting and doing the Timbuktu report on Friday night. For all of you who are watching, we do hope that you will like and share. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I forgot to put up the banner that said that the book launch is September 21st, the International Day of Peace.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, yeah, that's when the book launch is going to be. Hope
I'm
that you'll be able to join us
this person.
in person, and it's going to be on Zoom also.
That's awesome.
September 21st. We're looking forward.
Good for
Very
you.
excited. Thank you.
Excited for you.
Thank you very much. Everybody, we thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you will be here next week for more enlightenment, education, and the goal is to inspire you, inspire you to the greatness that you are called to be. For the entire team here at the Timbuktu Report, I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing
At the well.
everywhere. Oh, I'm so sorry. There is healing
At the well.
as well. Make it a fantastic
We can
moment.
do the echo.
Thank you all so much
See
for
you
joining us.
next.
We'll see you next time.